Our reputation's on the line, you know? When you walk around with a haircut, that's an advertisement for
Yeah,
our company.
totally.
So if you don't look good, like that reflects back on us too. It's not just how you feel.
To get started, what's your name?
Hi, my name is Becca Romero and I'm here with Spruce. I'm your wife.
It's true. For those who do not know, tell us about your business. Just first what it is, and then we'll get into history.
Yeah, so we're a men's clothier and barbershop in Denver, Colorado. We're a head-to-toe solution for everything someone needs to redesign their look under one roof.
Awesome. And how many square feet is your location?
Right now, we're about a little over 800 square feet and kind of split in half. About 400 is for the barbershop side and 400 is for the retail side.
Let's dig in a little bit to the two, would you call them divisions? The two pieces of your business?
Yeah.
There's the services and then the product. Explain how that works.
So there is some crossover synergy between the two departments, but the easiest way to think about it is it's part service based and part retail based, product based. So we do men's services such as straight razor shaves and haircuts. Then we also sell men's apparel, accessories, and grooming products. Crossing over to that side, we do clothing consults as well.
That's really cool. Tell us about starting Spruce. Why did you start it?
We officially opened our doors in June of 2015. But it takes a lot more planning and legwork. So I would say I started on the idea probably more in 2013, 2014. And I'd been working in the startup tech space with you for a number of years.
It's true. I was there.
And you were the kind of one who got me bitten by the entrepreneur bug, where I realized the fun and the creativity and the excitement and the freedom that comes with owning a business and being your own boss. But through all of the tech startups that I had worked on with you, and I saw how very into tech that you are, and reading magazines from Wired in your spare time and things like that. And it's like, at that point in time, it was like, oh, I like the idea of helping to create a business. But when it came to tech, when I was off the clock, I was off the clock. And you liking tech so much made me realize that, okay, this isn't my groove. This isn't my jam. So that's when I decided that I wanted to open a boutique. And originally the services side wasn't even part of it. I was just picturing that it was going to be clothing and housewares for men and women. So I guess you could think of it almost like an Urban Outfitters kind of vibe. But I was doing clothing consults for a lot of your male friends and, writing up proposals, taking them around to the mall, trying to find these specific pieces that I thought that they needed to round out their wardrobe. And then we would also have to take them to the barber shop and clean them up. And it was just, it was hours and hours of time. And I think that's where, I was saying, or I was probably, complaining to you that, man, there just needs to be a one-stop shop where you can get everything done in one place. It's a very curated selection of clothes. It's elevated basics. And that would, make this process a lot less painful. And I think that's where you kind of were like, well, yeah, why don't you take your boutique idea and just focus on men? At first I thought you're crazy because it's like, well, who, starting a business focused on the needs of men felt, really out of place. But the more that I did research and I saw that it was a growing industry, I saw that there was kind of a new trend in men taking more care of themselves and more of an interest in personal hygiene and grooming. Our society kind of looked down on guys where it's like, oh, you don't want to be too feminine, or if you take too much of an interest in how you look, but I feel like as a culture, we were kind of moving beyond that to where self-care was okay. Yeah. And it was a really, really underserved market. I could count on two fingers the number of independent men's retail shops in Denver. Everywhere else was Nordstrom. And I definitely didn't see any where it was a head-to-toe solution under one roof where you had the barber aspect and the clothing aspect. So thank you so much for the idea, because the more I looked into it, the more it seemed like it really made sense to get into that space. There was a real need there.
You touched on the entrepreneurial bug and all the positives that come with entrepreneurship. But why don't you share a few things, say maybe the top 3 things that you're doing today that you had no expectation around having to do, and that ends up taking way more time than you imagined it taking?
Well, I got into this industry because I really like fashion. I really like helping people. I didn't want to be, at a desk all day. Get to be really creative. how you assemble and pair pieces together. There's a lot of creativity there. And I feel like, unfortunately, I don't get to spend a lot of time doing that anymore. I'm at the desk quite a bit in the back office, and I'm responding to emails, and I am putting together reports and PowerPoints, and I am asking legal questions, getting people, their HR paperwork set up, kind of all the not sexy stuff associated with running a business. And I think I underestimated how much time I would be spending doing computer stuff. Yeah, and operational stuff. I mean, I'm a small business. I do have a bookkeeper that I outsource to. The day-to-day stuff, like I'm still, having to be in our P&Ls and things like that, and looking at the health of the business and paying bills, writing checks, sending out payroll information. There's still a lot that I have my hands in, even though that's outsourced.
So talking about all the operational things, this big part of this podcast is talking about technology. Let's go on a thought journey of what it would have been like managing the books, the financials before software. Where could you imagine? I mean, we didn't even, you and I grew up in a world that, like, by the time we got into work and business, there were computers. We never had to go manage finances in a big grid booklet with a calculator and a pencil.
Right, yeah, no. We got to get in a thought time machine. Go on a real fun journey.
Go on a journey now.
Yeah.
Because think about that difference.
Well, yeah, my mom worked in administrative services for a lot of her professional career. And I remember her telling me one time about all of this, paperwork that she had done, either handwritten or typewriting at, some office she was doing admin for. And they had the windows open because they didn't have air conditioning. And she was talking about how, like, a gust of wind came through and blew a bunch of these papers out the window and onto the street. And, like, it's just stuff like that.
It's like deleting a file on accident.
Yeah, I guess you can think of it that way. But you could
at least recover a paper on the street, but...
Can you?
Oh, man. But yeah, it's interesting to think about is there's a ton of things that you have to do today that software has taken so much of the manual's work out of the way that it might even be realistic to say that you as sole operator at your one location business would have been impossible 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
I would say yes, but I also think that as we have, you're saying software, computers and things taking more of this grunt work, allowing us to fast forward and be more efficient at these things, I don't think that gives business owners more free time. I think if anything, the expectation is higher that you're able to turn around and flip things almost instantaneously. You're supposed to always be on. Literally, you're supposed to, be at your cell phone's beck and call. Where back in the day, it was like, oh yeah, well, it's going to take me a while to fill out this paperwork, so I'll have it to you in 2 weeks. And now it's like you're expected to deliver that information tomorrow. So in some ways, it's helpful because it's taking certain work off of my plate. But in other ways, now that we're able to move at breakneck speed, it's expected that you're constantly working at breakneck speed.
Yeah, it's like you can do 5-person worth of work now, but now you're expected to. It's
Correct.
Not like you get to live by 1950s productivity standards, but using software.
Yeah.
It'd be
I mean, think about like Pony Express, man. Like when you would send something, it's like, oh, it got there in like a month and a half. That's pretty good. And now it's well, why didn't you respond to my text message? Why didn't you like my Facebook post?
Talk about specifically the journey with opening the barbershop and what it was like, because you don't have any background in barbering, salon, hair.
No,
even beauty is a...
Yeah, that was the area of this business that was more foreign to me than any other part of this business. And where I think I had to do the most, honestly, trial and error.
And what do you... So just tell us tell the story about, having to bring in the first people to be manager and, having to rely on the advice of a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, we wanted a head of barber services to kind of help us be like, how would you do these barber processes? How do you do a shave from start to finish? What are the steps? What are the products that are needed? What supplies need to be at each station? Oh, there's a thing called a back bar? Well, tell me what's in that. Like, literally, like, ground zero. Okay, so what licenses to be hanging on the wall? And you are putting a lot of trust into those people to be giving you good information. And you can, Google and ask around a little bit, but at the end of the day, like...
experience.
We essentially came to these people and said, like, okay, what would your ideal barbershop be like? because we want to be better than the places that you came from, and what were pain points at your previous barbershops that we can make better here. And so we got a lot of really good feedback there. But, do people also take advantage of that situation? For sure.
I find myself thinking about a lot recently is how we had not only no preconceived notions of how a barbershop or a service-based business should be run, but also we had no existing framework. So you've gotten to come up with the framework. You've got to design it without legacy. And that is a wonderful thing to be able to do. And it allows you to do things like like bring your own device. Other places are probably years out from being able to do. Mm-hmm. So for those who aren't aware, Spruce does allow everybody on the team to have their cell phone at all times.
Yeah. In fact, it's a tool of the job.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about why that seems counterintuitive and then why it's actually a good thing.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, I mean, I have experience in retail and being on a sales floor, just not in the barbershop aspect, but in general, like, it's very frowned upon to be, having your phone on you because they consider it a disruption, and it's taking you away from the customer because instead of paying attention to them or paying attention to the floor or what have you, they think that you're just messing around and, playing Candy Crush or whatever. But we use it as a tool. So when a client's about to arrive, it sends a notification that's like, hey, Bob Smith is here for his appointment that starts in 15 minutes. And here are the notes that you took the last time Bob was in. Here are his preferences. Here's a picture, his headshot. I mean, having that information allows us to better service the client. And it's not a distraction from the client. It's allowing us to tailor our services to them so they have a more personalized experience, as opposed to being like, oh, what did we do last time? Yeah. Or, oh, you sat with this one barber, but that barber is on vacation today. So I'm your barber today, and tell me how they did it. It's putting a lot of responsibility on the client to know things that the barber should know, which is like, which blades did you use, or which product did you use, or... Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so another good example, too, of software playing the role of messenger and note keeper, not note taker, because the team still has to fill out their notes. They just do it on their cell phone and get those notes delivered back. And there's still a risk, and there always will be, just people messing around on their phone, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So what would your advice be for an organization who is looking to personalize the experience for their clientele or their guests and is looking at the phone as an option to empower them to do that?
What is my advice to them?
Yeah, like being that you've run a bring your phone and use your phone at work business and stay one.
Well, definitely have a good Wi-Fi setup.
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so, if you're using some sort of shared platform or software or something like that, you want to make sure that everybody's got good connectivity and access to information, basically in real time. Good internet. And you're not relying on like, well, this person has good cell carrier and this person has bad cell carrier. But, it's also a great tool for allowing them to do social media or take pictures of their cuts and putting it online, or taking a picture of their chair or whatever and saying, hey, I've got spots today, come see me. So it's another tool in that regard. As far as like, if they do spend some time playing Candy Crush, for example, not to hate on Candy Crush, I did go through a phase where I played it. It's like, well, I know that they're on their feet all day. They're literally on their feet all day. They literally are having to talk all day. They're having to be on. So I understand that like allowing for some decompression time is sometimes pivotal because you want them to be able to recharge their batteries before the next guest comes in. So I don't really micromanage how they use the phone, but if it's getting in the way of like, hey, did you, are there clean towels? Have you rolled the towels today? Have you posted on social media? Did you take notes on that last client? If it seems like every time I walk by, they're doing something not productive when there are things they're supposed to be doing that are productive, then yeah, that's a problem. And I think that can be rolled back into, am I setting clear expectations of them and what is expected of them while they're at the shop? If they are completing those tasks and they need a couple minutes to just kind of recharge their batteries before the next client and they've, all the other things are taken care of, then cool, do that. I'm not here to tell you that reading a book is better than, being on Snapchat. Like, how people unwind is how they unwind.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually really good. So your phone is a distraction if there's clear expectations set on what the phone is used for and what your job duties are in general, and that we shouldn't look at somebody actually messing around on their phone in between things as necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
That's a cool perspective on it, because it's not an immediate fail that someone's checking social media. And you'd say the guest or the client being the number one thing, there's just rules around. Somebody enters, the phone goes away.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Client comes first.
So then when it comes to having built the shop and running it and operationalizing it, what is like the one aspect you're the most proud of?
I think it's just when I hear laughter, it makes me feel like I'm doing something right. Like, you know, there are little hiccups, you know, we're not always, you know, the most profitable, or we'll have a slow day, or, you know, there are little fires and things like that. But it's like, but if I'm in the back room and all of a sudden I can hear Ethan's very distinct laugh out on the floor, oh, like, I'm so happy, because it means the energy is good and it means people are having fun. And when the team is having fun, then that means clients are having fun, and it means there's good conversation and good rapport, and it means the energy, you know, because that matters so much more for a positive client experience than was the fade 100% on point. I feel like clients are more willing to forgive an imperfect haircut if they're having fun and having good conversation and drinking a beer and listening to music. Hopefully, I think that's what's going to be imprinted on them more than like, was this haircut 100% how I wanted it?
No, that's right on. I know a big piece of Spruce is not only creating that environment, but asking for feedback too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, are you talking about client feedback or teammate feedback?
Client feedback first.
Yeah. Client feedback, for better or for worse. I mean, it's important. You can't not listen to them, as long as it's, you know, constructive. But so what we do is our system sends out a text message a couple days after their appointment. And it's, now that you've had a couple days to settle into your haircut, do you have any feedback for your barber or for the team? And just so you know, we guarantee all of our services. So if you're not 100% satisfied, come back and we'll fix it for free. And I think letting them know that right off the bat already kind of like could diffuse any really, you know, harsh or negative feedback. And it allows us a chance to kind of intercept an unhappy client and make things right before they get on Yelp and start being like, this place sucks and like blah, blah, blah. So it's a very proactive damage control, which is funny because usually that's reactive, but it's a proactive
damage
way.
Mitigating.
Yeah. So if somebody is unhappy or they want something fixed, they're coming back to us. They're telling us what we can do to make the situation right. We're getting them back in the chair, and we're turning somebody who would have left and never come back into somebody who's like, oh, like they're willing to make their mistakes. They're willing to hear me out. And I appreciate that, because I feel like you see people get into like really gross and uncomfortable social media, like
spats.
Like, you know, you've heard of those restaurant owners or whatever, where somebody writes a negative review and then they'll be like, well, I heard that day when you came in that you did this wrong. And it's not that the customer's always right, but you have to be willing to look at yourself and saying like, how can we make this better? Because if this one person is having this problem and they're feeling brave enough to come and tell us about it, chances are there's 9 other people who are having that same issue but aren't brave enough and, you know, in coming to tell us.
That's a very good way to put it. And then also a person will complain to what, like 5 people or 10 people, and
that's a great point
compliment
too.
to one person.
Yeah, word of mouth is huge, especially when you're a small business, because it's not like you have a big marketing budget where you can, you know,
you can brand and rebrand and rebrand.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we're talking about feedback, and you made a couple of points. Firstly, if somebody's complaining on Yelp, there's probably more people than just that person, but that person was probably the 1 of 10 that had the energy to do it. But well, those other 9 people are still going to tell their friends and tell their family.
Right.
So the impact, it's not as big as if they go to Yelp, but it's happening.
Right. And I trust if you were like, oh, don't go to that Thai restaurant, it was terrible, I'm going to actually trust your opinion more than I'm going to look at a Yelp review where somebody said this Thai restaurant is terrible. Tops. You trust the opinions of your inner circle of friends more than you trust, you know, some rando on the internet. But they both do damage.
Totally. And as you said it before, as a small business, there's not a branding effort and a budget for you to address and to...
you rely on word of mouth heavily because it's free.
Yeah, because it's affordable.
It's the best advertising there is. But yeah, it's true though.
So a guest gives feedback, but then the way that your systems that you have set up work is that feedback gets delivered in the alert that they're coming back. So you get to see the last feedback when they come back.
Right. It's like it keeps it in this like intranet as opposed to the internet.
Yeah.
2 different important things.
Somebody gives some feedback.
it keeps it in a inside enclosed loop, and that only our team sees before it escalates and becomes public.
So what's your process then? Someone leaves a review. It's you guys all get notified. Mm-hmm. Somebody's upset. Mm-hmm. What's the process?
Well, ideally, let's say Bob gets a review from James. James is not happy with Bob's haircut, so he sends some feedback that's negative. I would immediately go to Bob and be like, "Hey, you probably saw the review come in."
You as the manager or owner.
Correct. And be like, "Hey, did you see this review from Bob that came through? He's not happy. Would you mind giving him a call back and letting him know that we guarantee our services and that anything that needs to be fixed, we'll happily do it free of charge. And also we will put credit on his account to comp his next haircut." So I know that every place is different. It's personally our policy not to offer refunds because that is work performed by the barber. But we are trying our best to make it right. And in a perfect world, if that client felt comfortable going back to Bob, I think that's even better, because then it's like, hey, we don't take it personally. You're not going to hurt Bob's feelings if you say like, my cowlick is a little silly. Can you fix it up? And it's a learning experience for Bob too, because then Bob can be like, oh yeah, like next time James comes in, I know how he likes his cowlick, or I know how to work with his particular type of hair. Because if you're constantly shuffling them around saying like, well, go to this person or see this person to fix it, then it's like nobody's learning. Oh, and that's the ultimate goal.
So what you're saying is that instead of, which might be the thing that you would do intuitively, which is come back, try a different barber, you're saying, no, come back, try the same barber, but let's work on getting that feedback.
Ideal. Yeah. That would be ideal. And some clients are open to that, but some clients aren't. And I'm not going to force them. Right. So if they aren't comfortable seeing that same barber again, depending on what the feedback is or, what their circumstances are, then we recommend that they see our head of barber services, which is our leadership team. And then that person should definitely have the most experience, and that person is gonna, exactly. It's the safest way to know that we're gonna retain them as a client, because if this person couldn't make it right, then we're gonna find the person that's gonna make it right, because that's important to us. Our reputation's on the line. When you walk around with a haircut, that's an advertisement for our company. Totally. So if you don't look good, like that reflects back on us too. It's not just how you feel. So that's our process.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to touch on guaranteed cuts. I want to understand your cost benefit on either side here of essentially comping a cut for somebody. You're saying not refunding, but comping the next cut.
Correct.
And as somebody who's not us could probably hear that and go, uh-oh, that's very scary, because I can end up getting a ton of free cuts. What has that been in your experience?
I found that every time we've had to do that, I feel like we have a really good rate of retaining that client. And then it's about the long-term gain of that client, right? So you're comping that one dissatisfied cut to make up for the one where they're dissatisfied. But if you're able to hook them back in again, we've got people that come in literally every week. And so sometimes you're comping one cut, but if you're seeing them 52 times a year, and they're tipping and they're buying product, et cetera, I mean, you're going to cover that cost of that comped cut and then some. Yeah. Obviously, I mean, there could be somebody that wants to abuse the system and complain and say that they didn't like a cut just to try to get a refund. But I think that's why the system of not refunding but comping the future cut kind of protects against somebody who might make false claim that they're unhappy just because they're trying to save some money.
So you're asking salon or barbershop owners to think a little bit differently here. Paraphrase what you said. Think about it not as giving a free cut. Think of it as securing a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
When you factor in the lifetime value of a client, if you could give one free cut to ensure 5 years of repeat visits, you probably do it every second, right?
Yeah.
Give everybody one free cut.
And or offer a discount to get them in. That's why we have incentive programs based off of retention rate for our barbers rather over everything else. Because it's one thing where we could be doing advertisements and flyers and Groupons and things, getting people in the door cheap to try to get that first cut.
Yeah.
But it's really on the barber to retain that person. You could always just be filling your chair with fresh people every single day, but that's not cost effective. It's an unsustainable business practice. It's on them to be like, okay, I got somebody to sit in your chair. Now it's on you to keep them. And so that's why we use retention rate as the metric that we use for our performance evaluations. Yeah, because everything feeds into that. If you're giving them a good cut, they're going to come back and see you. If you're knowledgeable about your product, they're going to come back and see you. If they're having fun and you're making good conversation, they're going to come back and see you. So it's like, rather than having a whole bunch of different metrics for them to worry about, just focus on the one. Everything feeds into that, and that's the most important one.
That's retention. Are they coming back?
Yeah.
That's a great one. So we talked about one of the things that you're most proud of, which was, it was fun to hear. What do you see as like your biggest failure or oversight that you're...
To pick just one? I've made a lot of mistakes. I've pivoted a lot. I think that one big oversight, I guess I should say one big mistake that we made when we first opened is assuming that everybody that we hired thought like an entrepreneur. Yeah. So in the past, when I had worked in businesses, I didn't feel like there was very much transparency. Transparency as far as, how we're doing financially, transparency as far as what we wanted to see in the business, or letting people have input and autonomy and all of these things. So when
insight into thought process, where in a business or a place that you've worked, you got the answer, but maybe always wondered, how did they get to that answer? And we were very open to sharing our path to the answer, which ended up not being a good thing.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is it's because you and I are kind of entrepreneurial minded, and we think it's really exciting and fun to be like, okay, like let's build something from scratch. How should this look? How should this taste? How should this smell? Blah, blah, blah. And then here, where are we going? How are we doing? And so we had literally made our QuickBooks available and our reports and everything to the entire team. And we expected that they were going to get really jazzed on having so much transparency and so much authority and so much input and, blah, 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 blah. And instead it was like deers in headlights, because they're barbers or they work retail. They're like, I don't know what a profit and loss statement is. You're putting these numbers in front of me. I don't know what these numbers mean or how to interpret them. You're putting too much responsibility on my shoulders. I just want to be able to do what I do, which is be behind a chair and cut and make somebody's day. And now it's like paralysis by analysis, or there's too many options. There's too many choices. There's too much, and they're not coming from a startup or entrepreneurial background. They're used to having somebody say, this is how we do it, and I want you to do it this way. Right. And it was intimidating and overwhelming for them. And it kind of made me sad after a while, because it's like, okay, I'm going to start withholding some information. We're going to be less transparent. We're going to start just showing you maybe the most...
highlight reel, maybe.
Yeah, or the information that most directly is relevant to you. These are what your goals are. These are what our numbers are for the last month. Here's what we want you to hit for this month. But it's not just like, here is the absolute world, and we're going to let you watch us go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Well, I was taking us down a different path there.
But you know what I'm saying, where it's just like, it was too much. And so that was a hard lesson to learn, is like, not everybody gets excited about the things that we get excited about. Everybody's got different passions. Everybody views careers differently. Everyone has different goals. It's not everybody's goal to own their own business.
Right.
It's, some people want to work in a business, not on a business.
Yeah. And it was super interesting too, the penalty we paid for letting people in on our ideation process. People who are not used to building and creating, being part of the process, and then not understanding too that like, hey, like 19 of the 20 things we talked about, we're not going to do. And also the things that we are going to do, we don't know when we're going to do them. As to your point, when they don't think like entrepreneurs, tend to think that you're going to do all those things. Oh my God, that's overwhelming. Or that because you haven't gotten to those things, you never do what you say you're going to do. And it's like, well, we're just like brainstorming right here about ideas.
Right.
It felt like the more we worked to kind of cater to the team. Yeah. And I mean, entitlement's a tough word, but it kind of fits like.
Yeah, and I don't think I could exactly pinpoint what I would do differently about that, because I mean, our whole slogan is get empowered, right? And that goes for empowering our clients to make educated decisions about products and how they want to achieve their best selves. But we also empower our teammates, and we want everybody to feel very heard and like they have input. And if they have ideas on ways to better the shop. We want to allow them to experiment and have an environment where it's safe to make mistakes or safe to fail, because at least you're trying something new. But it did feel like a lot of the people that we've had that at least especially in the beginning that came to work for us were like, oh, my old place was terrible and they treated me like crap, blah blah blah. And we're like, well, we value you and we see the awesome things that you do. And we were very encouraging and very empowering. But then it almost felt like, I don't know, we were too good of a job at making people feel good about themselves, because then all of a sudden they became very entitled and demanding and kind of spoiled.
So I was reading a book or an article about the difference between abdicating and delegating. And we saw huge differences in those two strategies. Abdicating being, here, you deal with this. Delegating being, here's a problem, here's what we need, here's some guide rails, I need you to check in by this date. So talk about how we went from abdicating to delegating and how it changed the culture of the company.
I think that's a really important distinction. And I think that is a great point. I do feel like, in the beginning, we had areas of the business that were just completely, new to us. So we were putting our faith in these third parties or these new teammates to tell us how, we're abdicating to them, saying like, we don't know how this works. Tell us how this works.
And tell us what your budget is and what money you need and what you need us to buy.
Yeah, and what would make this an attractive place to work for, other barbers. And over time, as we've gotten we've become more of a well-oiled machine, and as we been watching things play out, how we've had some employee turnover, how we've been part of industry associations where we're able to kind of compare benchmarks with other players in the game, things like that. We're like, oh, they said that 80% commission is normal and it should be more like 45 to 50, things like that, where we were given bad information or found that the information they gave us was not sustainable. And so that would be, I think, a big piece of advice that I would give to new business owners is that first year or two, you're designing your business in a vacuum. You're picking out your inventory in a vacuum. You're laying out your operations in a vacuum. And in theory, this is how our business is going to run. But when you're actually running and it moves from being theoretical to a living, breathing thing, you're going to have to make some really painful changes. You might realize, ooh, we're giving out too much commission and this is not sustainable. Or we thought clients would pay $150 for jeans, and really in this neighborhood or based on the clientele we're attracting, they only want to pay $80 for jeans. So I think there are a lot of growing pains during that first month or so when you're putting your ideas into practice and then you're getting that feedback, whether it's direct feedback where I'm saying to you, I don't like this thing that your company is doing, or it's indirect feedback where it's like, hey, how come this area of the shop isn't making much money, but this area of the shop is making a lot of money? You have to have some difficult decisions and you need to keep pivoting and changing your approach until eventually, now that we're 3.5 years old, I think we've gotten through the majority of our growing pains. And I think we have a system and operations and things that are working really well. We have some tweaks here and there, like we're never perfect. We should always be striving and looking for ways to improve or streamline. But man, in the beginning, it was stressful to find out that, the way that you had set things up was not optimal.
And to touch back on abdicating versus delegating, talk about the impact it had on the mindset of the people on the team, where abdication seems to bring your team towards a mind state that is very entitled and spoiled in a really interesting way, where you'd think it would be empowering. You think that, like, hey, here's a problem, you deal with it, that someone would thrive in that.
Right.
And either they seem to flounder most of the times, and then also, in the end, start to not listen to you as the business owner because they think, well, I did all this.
Right. Well, I think you kind of answered your own question there a little bit. I think it's important for people to feel that their actions have an impact on the business. You don't want to feel like you're just like a cog in the machine. You want to feel like your inputs are creating outputs that are valuable and that what you do has meaning. But that doesn't mean that you want to be figuring out through trial and error every aspect of your job when you're used to working in a place that has very clearly defined expectations. unless you have stock in the business or you're part owner, where you feel that, yes, I'm working my ass off, or I'm making these really difficult decisions, but it's coming back to me because I'm going to get a percentage of revenue or what have you. But if you're expecting just employees to be doing that and they're not getting to really see a direct financial benefit to doing things outside of their usual scope of work, which is being behind a chair and cutting hair, like, I could see why they would start to all of a sudden, be building a grudge over time, where it's like, well, why am I working so hard, or why am I making these big decisions? And there's no trickle down, or there's no direct benefit to me to be improving this business.
But then also, there are times in our company's history where, and the times in Spruce's history, where people on the team just wouldn't listen to you or I. Right? Like,
Yeah.
How did we get to a place where that would happen? But it doesn't happen today. And that's why I keep touching on this abdication versus delegation is like, now that you've started to operationalize that there's not many areas of your business left that you don't know.
I think that comes with time. I don't think that's something that you can just know right off the bat. Like I was saying, there's one thing about having an idea of how things should work, but then one thing when you're actually up and running. At my college, they had an entrepreneur program for the Kelly School of Business, and it's like, you can study entrepreneurship all you want. You can major in entrepreneurship, but until you own and run a business by yourself that you created, like, it's all theory. And I literally think that it's just, a lot of it is just going to come with time. There's always going to be new facets of your business that you cannot learn without doing.
Right.
And so I think that's how we were able to just kind of become a well-oiled machine in time, and how I was able to speak more authoritatively about the decisions that we've made. Because, even still, I'll have a teammate come up and be like, hey, why don't we do this? Or why don't we do that? And I'll be like, oh, well, we don't do that because we tried this, or we had a discussion about that. For example, our store manager the other day was like, hey, have you thought about having televisions in the shop so we can watch football games? And we're like, yeah, we have thought about that, and we're not going to do it because, like, X, Y, and Z, it's not our culture, it's a distraction, we want to facilitate conversation, blah, 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 blah. And he was just like, oh, okay, well, I'll shut up then. But it's only from having been approached and thinking through and working through all these different aspects of the business. I think that also allows the team to see me as more of an authority figure than I was when we first opened, because I'm honest and I'm transparent and I'm humble, and I don't know much about this, but you know a lot about this. I very much value your input, or let's work together. I want you to tell me how you think this should work. I'm a very democratic leader, and it's because I acknowledge that I don't see the whole picture, and nobody sees the whole picture. Everybody knows their piece of the puzzle. But when we all come together, then that adds to the pool of knowledge, and then we're able to make, I think, more informed decisions. But we've been doing this for a while now, and I think that's why things have changed, and I'm getting less pushback because I'm becoming more knowledgeable, and I'm seeing the bigger picture better than I ever did 3 years ago.
I think there are two things here that we're talking about. Is one, on an operational level, there are absolutely things that you learn that you're going to apply to any business, like lay out clear expectations, right?
Oh, yeah.
So when you're talking about, well, there are things you don't know, you're not suggesting that you just say, well, I don't know, I'm not going to define a process for this, we're just going to see what happens.
No, but I would consult with, an expert in that field.
Right, totally. And I mean, this is how people are serial entrepreneurs, is because they can take the operations of the business and how to run a business, separate it from the widget or the thing that the business provides, and apply those lessons going forward into their next business. And it's that advice that someone who's considering open a salon definitely want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are those lessons that if you were to shut down Spruce and start a new company that you could just apply right away?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that I still advocate every time somebody's kicking around just even the idea of a business is to write a business plan. Yeah. And I know that's very long and tedious, but I think it forces you to walk through every aspect of the business. From what are our hours going to be? Where are we going to operate? Who is our target demographic? Who are our competitor? SWOT analysis. What's the paint going to look like? What music are like? It's a lot to have to write out and think about, but it kind of forces you to examine every single aspect of this business. And if there are holes where it's like, oh, like maybe this, it doesn't make sense to have, you know, a coffee bar in a daycare or something, like, you know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, well, how does this make sense? Well, what are the logistics of that? And forcing you to think through those really tedious things. I think it allows you to kind of vet out the bad ideas, or at least identify where your obstacles are and where you need more research before you even, you know, bother going to a bank and saying, I need a loan, really solidifying it before you start spending money. Because as a small business, like, money is precious.
Yeah.
Very, very precious.
So true or false? It is better to have a process that is wrong than to not have a process.
Yes.
True. Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest 180s I've taken in life recently around business, is that not having a process is the worst, because it's ambiguous. When there's frustration and negative emotions around an ambiguous idea, then that manifests itself in very negative ways that spread throughout the company. Whereas negative thoughts toward a process that's not right is directed and can be corrected, which
Right.
is way easier than trying to uncover why somebody's frustrated, who their only response is, well, I feel lost.
Right. Well, it's like, how it's so much easier to tackle a problem that's defined than a problem that's undefined, right?
Yeah. And that's why you're advising, get a business plan, write out. It's not going to be right. That's what you're saying.
No,
it's not going to be right.
It's going to be wrong, but at least you're thinking through everything and you are able to identify, like, where your blind spots are, or what you need more information on, or you know.
And in addition to that, not only are you thinking through it and defining it, but you're giving everybody a thing to point at to say this is right or this is wrong, and then you can correct. Mm-hmm. Versus going in, opening the business with these operational gaps, and then going, hey, what happens when somebody complains?
Yeah. And that's something, you know, we recently got a new head of barber services, and I mean, and we also, you know, got a new store manager this year, and like our org chart kind of shifted a lot this year. And I was like, okay, this is the perfect time for us to, like you're saying, document, and look at old documentation of procedures and update those. And like, this is the perfect time for us to very clearly define how this business operates and what the expectations are. And then that way, if somebody doesn't know how to do something, or somebody's not doing something and everybody's like, well, they should just know. One of our barbers was making some lather, mixing a couple things together, and I was like, well, why are you mixing it that way? And they're like, I don't know, that's just how somebody else told me to do it. And I asked everyone else, and they're just like, yeah, I don't know, that's just the way we've been doing it here. And I'm like, well, that's not good. Like, we should know why we're doing things. We should know, like, if we're doing this right, or if this makes sense. Yeah, you should have an understanding of why are we doing things the way that we're doing, and that information should not all live within the brain of one person.
Yeah.
So,
and then the thing you hit on the most is then also don't sweat it if it's not 100% right.
Oh yeah, and I can tell you right now, it won't be.
But have it.
But yeah.
Have things defined, understand why, even if your reason is wrong, and even if your output is wrong, so you have something to point at, to correct, and to improve. That's pretty solid advice. So
thanks, I got it from you.
I got it from somebody. Okay. All right. 3 pieces of advice you'd give to somebody opening their own business.
I would say having a co-founder is important. You became a co-founder with me on Spruce, and I think that was invaluable because it's a stressful time. And you're going to have a lot of insecurities, and you're going to have a lot of, you know, stress and sleepless nights. And to explain it to your friends and family,
they don't get it.
And in my experience, no, not really.
I don't get it, yeah.
Especially, or, you know, I know a lot of people that do startups, but like retail or the barbering, I mean, they're just different animals. So I think having somebody that can be there in the trenches with you and has as much at stake as you do is invaluable. And eventually, you've kind of left the business to work on Spruce Labs. And that was scary and that was kind of stressful. But by then I was also like, we were pretty much a well-oiled machine by that point. If I hadn't had you there in the first couple years, like, I don't know, I probably would have just curled up in a ball and died.
Yeah. Bring a co-founder is very solid advice. Someone to suffer with you, to share in your pain.
It's lonely at the top.
Yeah. I think I recommend 2 co-founders in addition to yourself. And I think that's only because of my anecdotal kind of...
Because then if you have a vote, there's always... it's never tied.
Interesting. It's not about the vote. It's about mediation. So it's not that you're all going to raise your hands and decide something. It's that you and I are getting into it and have a third person who goes, oh, here's what you're saying, here's what you're saying.
Right.
You're actually not arguing. You're just talking about 2 different angles on the same topic.
Right.
And that to me has been like game changing for sure.
Yeah, I could see that.
So you've got, bring on a co-founder, bring on someone to climb the mountain with you. What else? Kind
of in a similar vein, like finding a network. Like, as soon as we started the business on Tennyson, we joined the Tennyson Business Association, like the Neighborhood Merchant Association. And I think that was super helpful in feeling like part of the community right away. A lot of cross-promoting, a lot of, joint events and things like that. And I think it's important to feel like you are supported by your community and that you have other businesses kind of for that same reason. If you don't have a co-founder, that you have somebody that you can go to and be like, hey, like, who do you use for security systems? Or, what do you do? Who do I call when there's construction blocking my business? I have found some amazing mentor that actually started a salon owners group here in Denver. I found that no such group existed for barbers or for retail owners. I don't know why. I think it's, maybe an ego thing where, everybody wants to fake it till they make it. And I think that it's a really hard thing, especially in like a very macho industry like the barber industry, where nobody wants to admit this is hard and managing people is hard and owning a business is hard and making sure that, everyone's getting paid at the end of the day is stressful. Everybody wants to act like, I got this. I know what I'm doing. And I don't want to admit any weakness or vulnerability because then, I don't know, they're worried that they're all of a sudden like, they're going to go under or something like that. So luckily I found somebody that opened one for salons, and a lot of their problems are the same problems that we have, but it is just much more of a supportive open group. And then I did not find anything for retailers or boutique owners, so I actually started my own group. I just started a Facebook page, and I've just been inviting people, and those people invite people, and then we just kind of post, and it's like, it's just kind of like question of the week, where it's like, are you open on Mondays? Why or why not? Or like, what are you doing for the holidays? Do you guys want to meet up and talk about, what our plans are to boost sales? And that group has been really, really great. And I found some like real gems of people in there with experience and a lot of input and a lot of support. So I would say look for support groups or networking groups where you can find like-minded individuals who might have the same obstacles as you. And if that group doesn't exist, then don't be afraid to start that group, because people will be so thankful. And like, there are other people, like everyone tends to feel very isolated, and they're going to find your group and they're going to be like, oh, thank you so much for making this group. I was feeling like I was just, I was the only one struggling. And it's nice to see that I can safely talk about these things here and we can work on these problems together.
Makes a lot of sense. So you've got find a co-founder or 2, find a mentor or support group, and not even an or and.
I would say, and don't be afraid to be yourself.
Okay.
I think this is something I like personally struggle with a lot. So you are a very like magnanimous person. You are a big character. You're very comfortable speaking in front of people, and you are the way that people view how a CEO should be, right? Where it's like, oh, they need to be able to like work a room and command a crowd and be like,
that's totally wrong.
This caricature, like these, but you think of like these big personalities too, like Elon Musk and what's his face from Virgin?
Richard Branson.
Yeah. Or like, you know what I mean? Like, so in my head, it's like, oh, like I need to try to be this person. I need to feel comfortable walking into a room and being able to command it and come away with like a bunch of leads and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I think very much overlooked are the kinds of CEOs that kind of are just Bill Gates, does not command a room, right? Like, not to
I
say
heard that he does, actually. I think
he's not a caricature or like a
stereotypical.
Yeah, he's not like super sparkly, but he obviously is more than capable.
Yeah.
People respect him. He gets stuff done, and I think that that's something where it's like, oh, I don't have to be that kind of person to have these results. It's just that those people don't command the spotlight.
And they don't get a bunch of articles written about
They
them, and they're not in the news, and they don't make movies about them.
They're not as splashy.
Right.
But the world needs those kinds of people too. I could just be myself, and guess what? I'm nerdy. I like having fun and talking about, movies and pop culture, and that makes a lot of our clients feel very comfortable, and they get to feel like themselves. And that's like the number one piece of positive feedback that we've heard from people is they're like, oh, I can just come here and feel welcome and just be myself. I don't feel like all the other barbershops I go to, I don't feel cool enough.
Yeah.
Or like,
I don't feel cool enough, and I own a barbershop with you.
Yeah. Or like a lot of barbershops are like, oh, you greet me when I walk through the door. Like, how sad is that? That they go into other places and it's like people don't even care enough about them or are too cool to even greet them. I don't know. It's unbelievable. And so it's like, instead of trying to fit into what these other businesses or these other personalities and trying to emulate them, be yourself, do what you do. And there are a lot more people like you than you think. And that's going to help differentiate you. And those are your people. Those are the people that are going to come to you every 4 to 6 weeks for 5 years. Don't worry about those other kinds of guys. Like, they've got spots for them. You don't need to be added to that list of places for them to go. They've got places.
Totally. No, that totally makes sense. So we've got find a co-founder or two to share in the struggle, find mentors and supporters and groups and peers or become one. And then third one is be yourself, do things the way that you'd want them done, and you'll be surprised with how many people think the same way you do. Yeah.
That's
great.
my advice.
What's the plans for Spruce coming up 2019?
2019, gosh, well, we're supposed to be moving to a slightly larger location sometime this year. The move-in date keeps getting pushed back because of permit issues. But if we're, if the date does not get pushed back anymore, we will be in a larger spot by the time 2019 rolls around, which will allow us to have more barber chairs and thus increase, the ceiling on our earning potential, while hopefully keeping our costs pretty much the same. We also have the line of our own private label products, the Spruce Beard Collection of the beard oils, beard balms, and beard washes. And we've been watching the growth of that as more and more stockists have started putting in orders to carry the products. I think that we're looking to grow within the building, but then also kind of be reaching out and spreading our Spruce tentacles all over the nation.
Oh, well, awesome. So Spruce men's head-to-toe boutique, half barbershop, half clothing store. How can people find you?
All right. Well, right now we're located on Tennyson Street in Denver, and you can find us online at www.spruce.me, and our Instagram is @SpruceMen, and Facebook and Twitter and all those usual places.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. That was great.
Yeah. I'll see you at dinner.
Okay, we would heaven.
Thanks for joining us. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Spotify. If you prefer video, you can check us out on Vimeo and then YouTube. And we'd love to hear your thoughts about the Guest First movement. Go ahead and shoot us an email at social@sprucelabs.ai so we can continue this conversation together. All right, till next time.